So we've been talking a little bit, for those of you who just came in, about teens and some of the problems, things that we are frustrated with and things that we love about them. Getting them to come in the library is always a challenge, especially those high school kids, right? They like to work on the computers, but that's all they want to do. They don't want to talk to us. They don't want to talk to anybody else. Playing games, they can be a little loud. They can be a little intimidating. They can take up a lot of space. They can, like, take over your entranceway. Some of the things that we really want for them, we want them to participate in the library, we want them to show up, we want them to give back, we want them to get along with everybody, and we want to bond with them, right? Because this is why we got into this line of work, right? It's to bond with the kids. And we need some mutual respect from the community at large, not just us, right? All right, so these are some of the things we talked about volunteers do. Craft programs, they decorate things because they're full of great ideas. They collect books for story times, they can shelve, they can help with programs, they can try out the desk. The part we're going to talk about today is helping with programs, and specifically helping with children's programs. These are some of the things that we're going to talk about in terms of marketing, because you're going to be marketing not only to the teens, but to the people who chauffeur them around, their parents. You're marketing to your library trustees, director, community at large, why this is a good thing to do. And you're also marketing to the little ones because you're having them run the programs, and they need to think it's a good idea too. So for the teens, they will gain skills. This right now, it's hard to get a job, but they can get skills doing volunteer work. It looks great on their resume. It looks great on college applications. You guys can write great recommendation letters. You can be references for real jobs. And we all know everybody because we're librarians. Little kids love them. They look up to teens so much, and you can teach these teens how to be role models, and that will make them a better part of the community, a stronger part of the community as they learn how everyone works together. They are talented. Teens have so many talents. They'll be able to bring ideas and skills. We were talking about computer skills. They know how to do all kinds of things that we would never even dream of. They're also incredibly creative. The image of teens in the community, we always want to make that better, right? So we include them in the community to make it better for everybody so that we all retain them. All right, moving along. What we're talking about today is a structured program. In my opinion, one of the best things you can do for your teens and the best things you can do for yourself is to provide some structure. Because that way you have rules and guidelines set out ahead of time. The kids know where their boundaries are. They know that you care about them, but you won't go over this line. These are their expectations. They know what you want from them. And that way you have things to fall back on. You can say, you have to do this before I will let you do this. And that way you're not flying blind. It's the same thing as working with little ones. You have to be able to tell them, I'm sorry, story time doesn't start for 5 more minutes. It's the same thing with teens. So let's talk a little bit about training. How would you train a teen who's never worked with kids, but who really likes them, how to work with little ones? Let's say preschool kids. What would you tell them? Think about some of the things that you do when you go into a room full of little ones. Some of the things you do without even thinking about it. You see a little bunch of little ones? What do you do?
You get down to their level.
Yes!
Get them to their level.
Absolutely. What else?
When we were working with puppets, it's really important not to just get right in their face. You gotta kind of see how they react before you get close.
Right. They're kind of like cats, right?
Yeah.
You kind of have to judge. So you want to...
Not get too close.
Right. And it's the same thing with teens, right?
Yes.
Because you don't want to be up in the teens' faces because they'll run away and never come back.
Introduce themselves.
Yes. What do you do with your voices? You walk into a room full of little ones. Yeah. Yes, sometimes we
Well,
do.
you have to kind of gauge it.
Yeah. You want to pay
They're-
attention.
Yeah, to how the kids are reacting. some kids need a little bit more peace and quiet, and other times, to come in and say, hey, get their attention, and they think that you're fun, or coming in and whispering.
Right.
'Cause then it gets everyone calmed down.
Absolutely. So you're going to pay attention to the reaction. You're going to pay attention to your volume. You're going to pay attention to your vocabulary, right? And with teens, that's important. One of the things I always tell my teens is,
Don't swear.
well, you know what I tell them, it works even better? The kids are going to go home and repeat everything that you say. And their parents are going to tell your parents, and you need to think about what you want to get back to you in the circle. And they're like, oh, okay. So you have to be very conscious, even if it's not swearing, even if it's being mean to somebody, even if it's you are criticizing somebody, you're making fun of somebody, even if it's talking about things that are just not appropriate for little ones, like, I just played Grand Theft Auto and I was running down, whatever. Like, the little kids are going to be like, Mommy, I want to play Grand Theft Auto. No, that's not.
And mom will say, where did you hear that? At the
Library. Right. It all comes back. So you're also going to pay attention to your body language, right? When you work with kids, you guys all know this, we wear things that we can crawl around on the floor with, right? We don't wear, short skirts. We don't wear high heels. We don't wear our favorite white pants. So we dress for the occasion, right? So you're going to pay attention to your dress. Now with kids too, with teens, printed t-shirts sometimes, it's important for them to pay attention to what's written or drawn in their t-shirts. And like kids, I tell them all the time, jeans and t-shirts, totally fine, as long as you're covered up. I don't see any of your underwear. It's totally fine, but I want you to look in the mirror before you leave and look and see, is it scary? Does it say something that you maybe don't want repeated? I had a kid one time walk in, and it was a band t-shirt, and it was like skeletons playing music or something.
Iron Maiden.
And he walked in, and he's like, oh, my t-shirt is scary. And I said, it's okay, go to the bathroom, turn it inside out, it's gonna be fine. He was mortified. So it's a good idea to just kind of run them through this and make them more conscious. The other thing is about teens is they're not really good at remembering what kind of image they portray. They're not good at figuring out, what people think about them, why people are reacting to them in certain ways. So it's a good lesson in life to just kind of make them pay attention to things like that. And same thing when you're writing letters of recommendation for kids, if they have an email address that's like, I had one that was like, what was it? It was something like Gangster Life, I don't even know, something completely inappropriate. And I said, you know what? Let me just give you a little tip for life. When you're doing job applications and college applications, make a professional email address. First initial, last name, bunch of numbers. Just because it's a little like, I love piggies, 69 is probably not the image you want to portray to the college admissions counselors or the people at, wherever you're trying to get a job. So that image piece is something to really this is your opportunity to be like, you know what, I'm giving you a lesson for later in life. Okay, what else do you guys do when you go into a room full of kids? So you're paying attention to your posture, you're paying attention to where you are, where the little kids are. What about the parents? What do you do with the parents? Who's the most important person when you're doing a program for little ones? The little ones, right?
Yeah.
So if the parents walk in, who do you say hi to first?
The little one.
Absolutely. So you're gonna greet the kids first. Which I think is one of the funny things when you tell teens that. They're like, really? I can do that? I said, absolutely. You say hi to the parents, no problem, but kids the most important thing. And the other thing is, so what do you say when you want to endear yourself to a child, especially a quiet child who's maybe hiding behind someone's knees? What do you say? What are the kinds of things? You guys do this every day. What do you say to them?
I like your
Mention
shoes.
something about their shoes,
Compliment
their
them.
t-shirt, yeah.
Chances are they picked out their own clothes, right? And they might have sparkly shoelaces, or maybe a sticker, or maybe like a ribbon in their hairs, or whatever. And these are really easy, like icebreakers, and they're concrete things you can give to the teens to say, when you introduce yourself to a kid, pick something they're wearing and compliment them. It doesn't matter what it is, or like, I like purple too. Wow, I like that color. Whatever it is.
Hello Kitty, yeah.
Exactly. Or like, I like light up shoes. I really, really want a pair of light up shoes. And so, I know, right? And so every kid who comes in with light up shoes, I'm like, oh, I love your shoes. Do you think they make them in big sizes like me? And they look at me and they say, no. And I've made a friend for life, right? So those are some of these tips. One of the things that you have to do is pay attention to those little things you do without thinking about, and start writing them down. So you write down stuff like this that you do without thinking. It's totally unconscious. It's just you walk into a room and you know what you're doing. You've been doing it for a while. Just living, you learn these things. These kids don't know. They have no idea. Some of the things they might guess, but these are things that you need to teach them. Simple, simple things. As simple as getting down. And the kids are close enough to this age that you can actually talk to them about it and be like, do you remember what it was like to be shorter than everyone else? And some of the kids will say, I do. What was it like looking up at everybody? It was kind of scary. Well, yeah. So you know what the best thing you can do? Get down and look at them in the eye. Oh. And so some of these things are really enlightening and will help them, like I said, later in life. All right, anything else I missed? Oh, when we're doing projects, one of the things that we do a lot of is crafts. When you're doing crafts with kids, what are some of the things that you do? Kids are making something. What do you say? What do you do?
Let them take a lot of the ownership of the process.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and pay attention to their ability and allow them to do what it is that they're able to do. Like if a child can't quite pick something up, they can at least press it, and or press on my finger or whatever.
Absolutely.
And say, wow, great pressing.
Right. And you talk to them, right? And do you ask them questions? Right? You ask them questions. And everything they do is fabulous, right? Yes. These are simple things. Everything they do is fabulous. And if you got to tell the teens this. And also, the other thing is, I am not an artist. I can't sing either. But I do this stuff for my kids. And you know why? It's not important. And so the thing you can tell your teens is, you don't have to be an artist. Actually, I'd rather you weren't an artist because I don't want you to intimidate my little ones. And so if you are sitting there making a sample, I want you to color outside the lines. I want you to have fun. Make this parakeet purple. I don't care. Make it like as sparkly and fabulous as you can because you are role modeling. You're a role model for them. And you're teaching them, and it's okay to be creative and to be unique and to mess up sometimes, right? One of the best things that you can teach a kid is that it's okay to fail, right? Mm-hmm. You can teach that through the teens, and we don't call it failure, right? We call it, that's just something special about your birdie. Your birdie has a horn, and that makes him special, right? Uh-huh. We don't criticize the kids. And these are some things that we know about. We would never criticize a child for doing whatever they're doing, right? Creatively. So you have to tell the teens this, and this is going to take a huge amount of stress off of the teens because all they have to do is roll with it. And so you say, all right, today we're playing with popsicle sticks and paper plates and we're making masks and they can make whatever they want. And here's all the stuff. Your job right now is to make sure that no one chokes on the sequins and that everyone gets along, that there's no squabbling. Beyond that, your job is to make everyone happy, to encourage everyone. If anyone needs help, you can do that. That's all they have to do. And so in doing that, they're going to make themselves feel better because look, they're playing and they're, being little 5-year-olds. And they're also making the kids feel better because this big kid thinks that my dragon's fabulous. One of the things I learned, one of the best lessons I ever learned when I first started teaching preschool back when I was very young, I had this awesome instructor and she said, the worst mistake you can make as a preschool teacher is to guess what that kid is creating or drawing.
Yeah.
And so what you want to do instead is mirror what they're talking. So if a kid comes to you and has this thing, you have no idea what it is, and they say, "Look, I made a peacock." All you have to do to say back to them is the same thing. You just say, "Look, you made a peacock." You can't keep your voice happy. You just repeat whatever it is. You say "fabulous," and they'll run off and be happy. That's one of the things that kids get stressed out about too. My teens are always like, "I don't know what it is, I'm afraid." I'm like, "Don't guess. Don't ever guess, because you will be wrong. And then it's bad." So it's a really good idea to just ask them. And if it comes to like, if they're making something fabulous and you have no idea what it is, pick an aspect of it to compliment. "I love the colors you're using. I love how you're filling up the
Or-
whole page."
Or tell me about this.
Exactly. Tell me about what you're making. Is there a story? Can you tell me a little story about what you're doing? Does your monster have a name? Things like that, and really kind of engaging them. And bless you. The other tricky thing about kids is, and you guys have all done this, what about those little ones who don't talk at all? You always have those little kids, right, who don't talk at all. And they aren't going to tell you anything about their creature. And they're just going to sit there and they're scribbling and whatever. Sometimes it's okay just to sit next to them and keep them company, right? And this happens a lot with the little quiet kids. Believe it or not, I was one of those kids when I was young. And all I wanted was company. And so if someone just sat next to me and maybe drew next to me or whatever, I was totally happy. And it would make my day because a big kid came and sat next to me. And so one of the things you can teach the teens is that different levels of support are for different kids. Some kids want to interact and, maybe, because kids come to the library with all kinds of baggage, right? Some kids come, they have really noisy homes with lots and lots of siblings, things going on everywhere. Some kids are only children and maybe they have a really quiet home. Some kids are coming from really chaotic kind of places. Some kids, everything is very structured. And so you don't know what kind of baggage they're coming to you with. It's possible that they're coming to the library because this is the only alone time they ever get. It's possible they're coming to the library because they need quiet time, and this is their special quiet time. It's possible that they're coming because they're home alone with their, grandmother all day long and they need to interact and they need to run around and be goofy. You never know. And so you don't want to make a lot of assumptions, and it's the same thing with the teens, and they will get that. But all of these things, this isn't prescriptive. I don't pretend to know everything about children. I've done a lot, but I don't know everything. But I just want you to start thinking about some of the things that you do that you don't think about. And then you can start teaching these kids how to do this. And not only that, but you'll make them into great teachers, great babysitters, and they'll be able to interact with kids. These skills will take them everywhere, okay? So, what else do we want to go through? All right. So let's talk a little bit about so you've taught these kids all these skills, right? It's going to take some time for them they need to practice, right? And that's why you're their mentor. And what kinds of things do you want them to do? You're going to put them to work now. What kinds of things do you think that they could do with those skills? You've taught them how to be pretty good with the kids. You've given them some confidence. You've given them some guidelines. I'm here to watch out for you. You'll never be alone with the kids. I'm here if there's an emergency, if someone starts crying or bleeding or whatever. I'm here. What do you want to do with all that? You have this talent. What kinds of things can your teens do? We talked a little bit about puppets, right?
Oh,
They could do a
okay.
puppet show.
Okay.
What else could they do? They could run a craft program.
You could play board games.
Mm-hmm.
They can help.
Reading buddies.
Yes. Now we're thinking. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say they could help some of the more wiggly bodies sit still through a story.
Totally. They could be story helpers. They could be storytellers.
I
Now-
saw them do with Erna last summer, really neat, what do you call it? They did, the crayon one, and they each were a
Yes.
different crayon, and they had to explain their thing. Sometimes they could, and sometimes it was really the team working with them that sort of explained what they did, but they kind of adjusted to wherever
That's
the kid was. That
fantastic.
was really impressive.
That's
I
really
wish
fun.
I'd thought of it.
Was it the day the crayons quit?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, that's the one. I work with teens, but I watch what the other people do.
Absolutely. What about
Reader's
those like
theater, that's
big?
what it was.
Oh, Reader's Theater.
Yeah.
What about those big summer parties that you have? Like you have those big events.
yes.
You need hands for that stuff,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So parties. Now I have thrown some massive parties in my 10 years as a librarian. I've done everything from Elephant and Piggy, which was actually the teens' ideas, which is so fun. I love Elephant and Piggy. We've done Elephant and Piggy is Mo Willems.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
The story.
I
thought it was a game.
And then Harry Potter parties are still going strong. That will never go out of style, right?
And
Um,
Percy Jackson.
Percy
Oh, yeah.
Jackson,
Uh-huh.
absolutely. I've done science programs with the kids, and they love it. We've done tea parties. We have a superhero party. Whatever you're planning for the summer, one of the things that like teens are really good at is stations, because you can give them their own little ownership. Like, okay, you are in charge right here of sorting. So the kids come to you and they're gonna sort things. Here's your materials, where does it go? And they can own their own little station. And then you're free to oversee and make sure no one's getting hurt. So stations are really nice when you need extra hands. So there are a couple of different ways that you can put teens to work. One is when you need extra hands, right? So I always tell people one of the reasons I never became a classroom teacher is because I can't write on the board. My handwriting is just not good. But all right, you can need extra hands. You might need, they could be the presenter, right? If they're doing Reader's Theater, they're doing a puppet show, they're doing story time, they are the, you run the event, but they are the talent, right? They're the ones on the stage. They could be, what else could they do? They could do one-on-one work, right, with your kids, either in like a big, like setting kids that need some extra help, or like in a program like Reading Buddies where everyone's working one-on-one. And they can also be the planners when it comes to these like crazy programs that they have like dreamed up and they really, really, really want to do. Okay, so when you do programs like this, it's important to think about what you're using these teens for, okay? If you're using them for extra hands, unfortunately, too many extra hands makes for more work for you. And if you have bored volunteers, they're just gonna get into trouble and they're gonna be bored and they're gonna be like taking things apart or whatever. You don't want that. If they're presenters, it's a little bit different, right? You just, however many you need to run your little program. If they're doing one-on-one, it's a little harder because you have to make sure that you match them one-on-one with the kids and you might need to do sign-ups and experiments and see how it goes. It can be a little more challenging. Planners, you can use all the teens you want because you can bring them in, have them have a big, gathering, feed them and say, all right, we're planning a Harry Potter birthday party. Let's go. And then you bring a big, easel like this and you start brainstorming ideas. And you come up with ideas on what you're going to do. So these are some of the things you have to think about. One of the things with teen volunteers is they are going to challenge you on everything. And when you set limits on the number of volunteers that you can have for a program, like you say, I'm sorry, we can only have 2 volunteers for this program, they're going to say, why? And then you're going to be able to explain to them, because there's not enough work for it, more than 2 people to do, and I'm worried you're going to get bored and then you're not going to like coming here, and I really want you to have fun, so next time. One of the ways once you get started that you can do these kinds of signups with limited numbers, like if you only need 2 kids here or 3 kids there, is do it by seniority. And so your kids who've been doing it for a little while, you trust them a little bit more, right? They get first dibs. When you're first getting started, it's a little bit trickier. All right. Comments, questions? Anything? Okay. Let's go. I'm going to give you handouts. These are big long lists of things to think about. I'm going to post them online too. And they're also in a chapter. I wrote a chapter of a book on library outreach, and that's where all this comes from. Most of the stuff that we talked about is all on here. Things like, why do you want to do this? Children look up to teenagers. Teenagers like to be admired. Some of this might seem really obvious, but to someone who's never worked with kids, sometimes it's important to spell this stuff out. Teens will soon be voters. It's important to remember when you're talking to your board, right? Why would we have to deal with teenagers? They're going to vote soon. When they turn 18, they have their opinions matter. So these are some of the things that that you can think about. The next page is training, all the things that we just talked about with some other tips. The next page is scheduling. One of the things that I've done, and it really depends on your library, is I broke up the year into 3 chunks. Summer is obviously a chunk, right? And then the rest of the year I divided kind of according to the sports schedules. So September to December-ish, and then January to May-ish. And it just kind of depends on your town. If you have a huge hockey town or whatever, you might need to break up your schedules a little bit more. And what I would do, and it really just depends, is I would have a training session at the beginning of each session to allow new kids to come in, do some training. Then they would do their volunteering and work for you and everything, and then you'd have a party at the end. Which, I'll tell you this, volunteer party, it's a teen program. It looks good in your numbers. It's not terribly expensive, especially if you can get some donated food. And all it is time for them to hang out and bond. So maybe you have some, you give them some presents, like give them some stickers or, whatever. I used to go to Michael's and get like the clearance stuff, like goofy things that you get for like 99 cents. And be like, thank you so much for helping me. I really appreciate it. And have a party. Put on the bubble machine, whatever. It doesn't take much. But it's an easy way to kind of break up the schedule. The other reason I did that is because I would schedule my calendar in advance. So where I was, we scheduled very far in advance because we were all fighting over one meeting room. And so it was me, it was the other children's librarians, it was, teen programming, it was adult programming, it was community programming, it was like everyone wanted to be in this one space. So I had to schedule really far in advance. Not everyone does it that way. But the reason it helped me is because in like September, I would put out the applications and I would have the whole schedule for the fall lined up and they could sign up for what they wanted to participate in ahead of time. And it was like a 3-month chunk, which is kind of what parents could handle in advance, put them on their family calendars. And then at the end, we'd have a party, yay! We'd have a little break, and then we'd start all over. These are things for you to look at. We're going to do some brainstorming in a few minutes. Easy programs to start with, okay? You're starting, you have teen volunteers, you've never had them before, you're not sure if you trust them, you're not sure how much the training worked, and you're not really sure, what are you going to put them to work with? This is what I recommended. This pen sucks, man. Throw that away. Legos and crafts. Easy. You cannot mess them up, right? It's easy peasy. Legos, piece of cake. Set them up. Make sure no one chokes on them. Everyone's getting along. You can oversee. There's not a lot of production, You've probably done it for a while now, so you know how it goes. You know the kids. you have the teens will help you put up the displays and like think of ways to make sure that they're pretty and make sure everyone can see them. They'll talk to the kids and be like, oh, what are you making? Maybe we can put a title on it. I love, Sam Maskell had an idea. She makes the kids put titles on their Lego creation, which I just think is the cutest idea ever.
That's what we do, but they're all the same thing.
Really?
It's like the death ship. Every single one is some kind of
Another
ship.
death ship.
Okay,
And-
sometimes that can backfire apparently.
No matter what they make, it's some kind of a ship.
Death ship.
Yeah. And
Oh,
we
boy.
have a no weapons policy, so we go around and collect the bows and arrows and the little, Lego guns and.
You still end up with death ships.
Oh yeah.
We do a 15-minute, the first 15 minutes is a Lego quest. So I come up with something different every time to
We do too, but they totally
Huh.
ignore what we tell them to make and make a death ship.
Well,
It's a death ship.
They're not all death ships,
Who
but they're
knows?
all some kind of ships.
ship that causes death.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things your teens can help you with, especially if you have enough to like sit at every table or be with every group, is that they can help you steer them like maybe in a different direction. Like, hey, let's make a house. Or, maybe you can make something other than that. A pirate ship. It's a different kind of ship. I have no idea. But that's something that they can do. But this program is easy, right? Legos is pretty low key. It's nothing, new or like fancy. It's something you can put your teens to work at with, and you can see how they do. Because one of the things you're going to have to do is evaluate these kids. You're going to keep an eye on them, see how they're doing with these kids, because eventually you might want to recruit them for super special programs. Like we're talking about reading buddies. Would you allow every volunteer to be a reading buddy, one-on-one? Heck no, because you want to be able to vet them first. You maybe want a recommendation letter. You want to know that they are reliable. You're
And they can read?
trusting them. Yes. So key.
I mean,
You need to make sure they can read.
Yeah.
You need to make sure they like to read. You're gonna need to make sure they have a positive attitude, that they're patient. Those are things that are special. So when you watch your kids, make sure you keep your antenna up for those special kids that can do those special things. So when you're doing Legos, you can watch them and be like, oh, she's really good with that kid, or he needs to learn some patience. And you go over and talk to them and be like, you know what? It might be a really good idea, instead of waging war with this little child, to maybe make something with him or make something next to him, and giving, positive feedback. You're constantly, trying to evaluate these kids. And if you have kids who are not a good match for your program, which is one of the nightmare situations that you will run into, making sure that you have this conversation. And one of the reasons I put age limits on mine, partially because the town I was in, I got flooded with applications. So I said 7th grade, period. You have to be in 7th grade when you apply. No exceptions, period. And the reason I did that was because the younger kids drove me crazy because they weren't ready. They were too wiggly. They were too distracted. They weren't, like, some of them would come with their parents. And I'm like, you're my volunteer. You are a grown up. You need to go away. And that was really hard. And so what I did was I put an age limit on it to make sure that I got like the most mature kids. But then we'd have to have, I treat them like employees. We'd sit down and have a conversation. You know what? It doesn't seem like you're having fun with this. It looks, you kind of hang out in the corner, you're sulking, you haven't smiled all day, do you really want to be here? Or is this something that your mom's making you do? Because I need people here that want to be here. And you're going to have those tough conversations with kids. The worst ones are the kids who love it and think they're really good and aren't. Those are the worst conversations ever. I don't have a magic answer for that. It's very, very hard, and you kind of hope that they get interested in something else.
It's also pretty rough when they're there because a friend is there, and the friend is a really good volunteer,
Yeah.
but the one who came along is always distracting and wanting to converse. And
Yes, and that's one of the reasons that you really want to set policies, and we're going to write our own policies in a little bit. Yes, do you have something else?
Just the friend becomes another preschooler, only a poorly behaved.
Yes.
louder, poorly behaved,
Yeah.
little preschooler.
Unacceptable. Absolutely. Crafts are another thing that are really easy to do with teens. especially those nice open-ended crafts, like the ones where you just clean out your craft closet and are like, we have cardboard
Washing
boxes,
stones.
exactly. And eventually you'll be able to have the kids like go into your craft supplies with you and say, what should we make today? My teens came up with awesome ideas. In the summertime, I would let them decide. They'd come in an hour early. They'd come into the magic craft closet, which was like the big perk of the job, was that they got to go into the craft closet. And I mean, I liked it, they would go in, and I'd be like, all right, what do we want to do today? And one week the kids saw, we had these like styrofoam pieces that were from some office product, I don't know, that we had ordered. They were like, oh, we can play with those. And I had no idea what they were doing. They took a styrofoam and they carved them with spoons, and they made them into stamps. And so they put paint on them and they stamped, and they made little styrofoam stamps. I'm like, you guys are brilliant. I knew this already, but thank you. And sometimes they come up with like these crazy, crazy ideas, like, oh, I see a lot of tubes. Let's make something with tubes. As long as they're not swords, we're cool. Let's do it. And that way, you can see how creative they are. You can see who the natural leaders are. And you can kind of stand back and pay attention to the big picture. Is everyone safe? Is everyone having fun? You can do your job while they do like the little nitpicky stuff. Okay? So one of the things we talked about in the beginning was setting boundaries and structure for the kids. One of the ways that I do that is by having an application process. This is my application. I've been using it for 6 years now. 1, 2, 3, 4. You actually have 2 different applications here. I just printed out the parts that I thought would be interesting to you. The first one is called the Story Teen application, which is my program that I do where I teach kids how to do pajama story time. I just did it because it's smaller. There are fewer dates. But it looks very official, right? There's a place for a parent's signature, because you want to make sure that the parents know what they're getting into. They have rides. Because there's nothing worse than having a kid say, yeah, I can come, and then having nowhere to get there. And you want to make sure the parents are on board for this, because this is a big responsibility. There's some little questions in here. You want to make sure you have all their contact information. If you have an emergency release form, you might want to attach that if whatever your library requires. I wanted to make it look like an actual job application, because it's practice, right? You need to practice. You will notice sometimes parents fill them out for the kids, which is truly obnoxious. But most of the times the kids will do it, and they'll fill in little things, and it's really cute, and you get a little insight into who these kids are. And then I have, all the dates for pajama story time, and then I have a training, and I always had 2 training options where we would get together and do training. I always did training for 1 hour, a little longer for the story teens because they have to learn how to do story time. But it was a special program. And then the end, this is the part we're going to pay attention to. This is policies. There are 2 different policies listed here. There's one for story teens and one for the regular volunteer program. So I had lots of different applications. I worked for a very big library, 2 very big libraries. And so I had applications for kids who were just doing volunteer program, which means crafts and Legos, parties and tea parties and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. I also had an application for the kids who wanted to do story teens, which was pajama story time. They would read stories on Tuesday nights to the kids. It was really cute. And they also did stuffed animal sleepover, which was their favorite thing in the whole wide world. And then I had an application. I tried a Reading Buddies program for a while. It didn't work in my community because no one wanted to sign up for anything. And the drop-in thing just became a disaster in terms of planning. So the teens really wanted to do it. I couldn't get the parents to show up. And so I had different applications for different programs. And that meant that you could have different requirements and different policies for each one. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to think about policies in your own library. These policies, of course, when you write policies, you want to do a couple of things. You want to make sure that you're setting structure for the kids and expectations so they know exactly what is expected of them. You want to protect yourself, right? You want to make sure that you're never letting the kids alone with, the teens alone with the kids. a bad idea. You want to encourage them to request letters of recommendation. You want to make sure that your kids are on time. You want to make these kind of basic job things. And then you want to think about other things, like maybe dress code, maybe things like food in the library, whatever's an issue in your library. So these are some of the things that I considered important when I was doing it. And I did it over a number of years, so they definitely evolved. One of the big things that I had to teach kids, and it's funny, my dad is an engineer and he hires new college grads and he has to teach them the exact same thing about calling in sick. For some reason, kids today don't learn about calling in sick. So I've taken it upon myself to make sure that these kids learn. You have to call in. You can't just not show up. It's unacceptable. And I had such a high demand on my program, and once you guys have really high demand on your programs, you can do this too, is you can tell them, you don't show up, you can't be a part of this program. I would say one no-show without a call, sorry, you've been fired. I can't have you here. Because what's the point of having a volunteer if they don't show up? It really ruins your plans. So I always told them they did schedule changes, and this was also a kick in the butt for the parents, for if they're going to go on vacation, if they're going to go look at colleges, if they're going to do whatever. I need to know their schedule changes 2 weeks in advance. If they're sick, just call. And then I would give them a sheet of contact information, you know, how to figure out if the library's closed for weather, especially if they don't live in your town. You need to make sure that they know how to figure out if your library is open. Contact information, like, you know, check the website, check this phone number, call, you know, if you get stuck in your driveway, if you slip and fall, whatever, just call me and let me know that you're okay. The other thing is with the teens, you're going to worry about them, right? So if they're 20 minutes late, you're going to be like, oh my God, are they okay? Like, did they forget, or are they on the side of the road dying somewhere? Like, you want to tell them that. You know, we worry just like your parents worry. You can't just disappear. You need to call. A lot of teens today hate making phone calls. They have to get over it. So sorry, you're not getting my cell phone number, you can't text me. You need to call. Pick up the phone. I know it's hard, but I promise librarians are nice. And you call and say, I'm really sick, I'm dying, I won't be in today. That's all you gotta do. It's good practice for later on. One of the things you have to drill into them though, you can't send an email, you can't write a note, you can't make your mom do it, you have to do it. It's part of this ownership thing. And I was a hard ass about it.
What if the parent does call?
It depends. If the parent calls and says, you know, he's right now throwing up in the bathroom, you'd be like, I'm so sorry, that's fine. But if the parent calls and says, you know, he doesn't feel good, what I would say is, you know, this is great, but next time I really need Jimmy to call himself because this is his job. And I really need to make sure that he's participating in this. And sometimes it's hard because these parents, they mean well, but they're all
Helicopter.
involved. Yes. Same thing with the applications and with training. I would kick all the parents out during training. They're not allowed to be part of it. And I would, when they fill out the applications and stuff, I would talk to the kids and be like, one of the things I would also do in training, somebody in Western Mass had this idea, is when you go into training and you talk to the kids, you say, you know, are any of you guys here because your parents are making you be here? Is anyone here because they don't want to be here? Because if you don't want to be here, I don't want you here. And you know what? I'm more than happy to tell your parents that it's full and that, you know, I couldn't use any more volunteers. I'll help you out. It's no problem. And some kids will take you up on that and be like, yeah, I really hate kids. Okay, no problem. I'll write you a little note to your mom. You don't want them. They're just trouble. But yeah, having those hard conversations with parents, I was the hard ass. I'd be like, sorry, I need to hear from Jimmy. He needs to give me a call and let me know what's going on. I get parents too who would call me and be like, well, we didn't know that we're going on a college trip tomorrow. Bull.
Right.
You knew like a week ago. Could you please, you know, you need to take this seriously just like he does, and these are the consequences. So it's hard. It's very hard. And you know, use your judgment as far as your community and how, and it's hard too because like everyone's related to everyone else and everyone knows everybody else, and that's even more true here in Vermont. So you want to be careful not to anger anybody. But if you just have policies and it's all written down and they sign it, then they are expected to understand that this is how it works. Okay. Punctuality. One of the things, I used to work with somebody in my children's room. She was much less free form than me, and she would start right at, the kids would come an hour early, and she'd start and she'd be like, you're doing this, you two are doing this, and you two are doing this, and ready, set, go. And if you showed up late, it would totally throw her off her game. She'd be like, oh my God, I have an extra person. Or like if her kids would come late, she'd already like start doing everything. And so I use that as an example. It's really hard because if you have a group of people and you explain everything. Hi, today we're going to be making ice cream. So what we're going to be doing, this is what I need you to pay attention to, blah, blah, blah. And then 5 more people come in, 10 minutes late. You have to go through the explanation all over again. And that's just not cool. And it's frustrating, and it ruins the momentum of the day. So you have to explain that to the kids. Kids like to have reasons for things, especially those like middle school kids who are just starting out. And be like, you know what, it's really hard for me to explain it over and over again as everyone comes in. It's easier for me if everyone's just here on time. We go through it once, and then we start having fun. It's hard though, it's very hard. Make sure they have those phone numbers and email addresses to be able to contact you though if they are running late. And make sure you tell them too, if you're sick, I don't want you here. I don't want you here if you're sick. If you're feeling gross, if you're sniffly, I will catch it, I don't want it. Stay home. That's totally fine. I just need to know. If your car won't start, if your cat dies, oh my God, stay home. It's totally fine. Just call me and let me know, because you don't want to make them feel like you're being a ball buster. You're not. You have compassion. You take sick days. You understand. And if something happens and, you get stuck on the sidewalk or somebody's school got delayed and you can't get, we understand, it's fine. They need to call and let you know. What else? Oh, I make them wear name tags, always. It helps me because I can't remember their names to save my life. It helps the kids because they can see them, and I have them do them homemade. If you have a button maker in your library, those are really fun. Because they're permanent. You can have them make a little button, have a little lanyard, and then they look more official, oh, you are part of the library. I invested, it cost me about $50 to have lanyards made, the library's name on them, and I use them. I've been using them for 5 years, and they got kind of dirty at some point, because kids, I don't know what they get on themselves, but they turn brown and blah. Anyway, we don't talk about it. But, they'd have a little button and then you could see their name and they decorated it so you can
I once made a mistake with name tags where I told them they could put their name however they wanted the kids to say it. And I had some really wacky, one of them was like Dr. Maniac or something like that. But I did tell them,
You did! It's so true! It's so true!
And you think, did I really have to specify exactly?
Sometimes you do.
Yes, I did.
Yes,
Left it wide open.
Sometimes you really
Say,
do.
really?
If their names was James and they wanted to be called Jim, but nope.
Right. And legible is also good. I had kids who'd write them really, really tiny, and then they'd make monsters all over it. You're like, I can't read that. Make it a little bigger for the kids who are just learning how to read. But it's also really fun, little bonding experience. If you have I love button machines. I think they're so fun. But if you have another way to maybe just laminate them with some tape or something, just make them on paper, and then just use some clear packing tape and laminate them. That way you don't have to make them over and over again. And it can also be, lanyards are good because then, they can just put them on. You're going to lose some because they'll go home with them. But then if you have a place in your library where they can just come and get them, it becomes kind of their space. You have the name tags on the side of your desk or on the side of the children's area or whatever in a basket or something. Then they know that's where their name tag is and they come in. The other thing with kids too, and like I said, I was not a very outgoing child. So I can totally relate to this. You have to give them something to do when they walk in, because otherwise it can be really anxiety provoking. Because you walk into the room and you're like, you're new and you don't know everybody, and you're like, oh, what do I do? Get your name tag. First thing you want to do, go get your name tag. And that way, you know, maybe they're coming into an employee area or whatever, and they'll start talking to people. The second thing you do is you go here. The way my library was organized, like my office was, of course, nowhere near the desk. So they come in, get their name tag, and then I would have them check in at the children's desk. And whoever was there would tell them where to go. Your library is totally different. If you have a really small library, getting their name tag might be the easiest way for them to make sure that you see them, and then you start talking to them and being like, all right, we need to make everyone go over here. But give them something to do first, because otherwise you're going to have, like, you know, 5 gangly teenagers in your corner going, and that's just, it doesn't make for a good experience for anybody. All right, what else? I always tell kids, and I got this from a workshop I went to a million years ago, that they are unpaid employees. And I think that makes, it drives the point home a little bit. If you have numbers on the number of volunteers you have, in Massachusetts we are required to keep all of our statistics on volunteer hours, but if you guys have statistics, you can be like, we used 300 volunteer hours last year. We couldn't run this library without you. You have to make sure that they feel important. And so use those numbers. Make sure that you tell them, you know, we have 50 volunteers in this library. It's a miracle. We could not do our jobs without you. And so you want to make them, it's like the respect thing, you know, you want to make sure that they feel important so that they do a good job. You know, it all goes hand in hand. So tell them, you are an unpaid employee. You're not just a volunteer, you are part of this library. You reflect on me and on the library in everything that you say, everything that you do, how you treat each other, what you wear, what the kids repeat, and you help make this library go. And then all of this other stuff will fall into place. You are an employee. Just like me, you have to be on time. Just like me, you gotta call if you're gonna be late. Just like me, you gotta call if you're sick. Things like that, okay? It's always important to make sure that they know, introduce them to the people. When I do training, I try to do training at a time where they can meet people. So you take them around the library, especially in a building like this where you have multiple floors and maybe some staff space. Take them on a tour, make it special. Be like, all right, we're all going on a tour. Introduce them to everyone in the building, from, you know, janitors to whoever's the front desk. Be like, make sure that they have put a face to the name, and tell them everyone here is really nice, I promise. Because they might be a little intimidated, especially if they've spent the whole time working with the children's staff and they haven't worked at the desk, they haven't interacted at the desk yet, they're not sure. And it depends on the size of your library. But make sure to, like, take them around, be like, do you guys all use this area? Do you know that I buy the books for the young adult area? Do you read these books? If you ever want me to buy something, you just let me know. And you start to bring that, like, kind of advisory board piece into it. If you ever have ideas on how I can make this space better, let me know. Or if any of you guys ever do art projects and want me to hang them up on the walls, come talk to me. And make sure that they know what you do in the library too. And then bring them to the staff areas. If there's places, you can be like, yeah, you can put your water in here, your lunch. Here's a place to get hot chocolate. You know, make sure they know where, if there's a staff bathroom. One of the things I've found with working with teens, you need to have a supply of Band-Aids and tampons. You just have to have it because it's going to come up. You need to have the non-Dora the Explorer Band-Aids for the teens. Because, you know, as children's librarians, we all have the Dora Explorer, you know, like Sesame Street, whatever. You need to have the cool ones for the teens. And you need to have tampons, because these kids are going through big changes in their lives, and I have been doing this for 6 years, and it's happened to me 4 times. And it'll just be like, Sharon, do you have a tampon? And I'll be like, crap, I don't. So what you do, you buy a cheap box, you stick them in the staff bathroom or wherever, in your desk drawer, and you just have them in a safe, discreet place where you can say, bottom drawer of my desk, open it up, take whatever you need. It's the part of the world of working with teens. If only we could hand out deodorant.
Yeah.
Or clean socks. All right, make sure people know who's in charge. So who's in charge of the children's room? Who's in charge of the library? Where do they stand? Where are they going? Can you ask for help? If there's more than one person, I like to give them first, come into the children's room, ask a question. If they don't know, or if there's no one sitting there for some weird reason, go to the circulation desk, ask them. If they don't know for some reason, go to this person so that they have like a place to go. Of course, if you have a tiny library, you don't need to worry about that kind of stuff. Of course, I always put something in here about how we won't tolerate harassment, abusive language or behavior from or towards its participants. I put that in to protect myself and also to protect the teens and to show them that I am serious. That means that if they're being bullied, if they're being harassed by one of the other participants, by staff members, you never know what could happen, by other community members, whatever, we will protect them and that we won't tolerate it, period. If you have a kid who starts bullying one of your other volunteers, out, done, no tolerance. You really, really need to set those limits ahead of time. And if you have specific concerns in your library, make sure to talk about those. Like, if, I don't know, people fighting over computers or whatever it is. If you have special needs kids, especially, sometimes you'll have special needs kids who want to volunteer. You want to make sure to protect them as well. And they might bring special skill sets to your program. And you have to make sure they are treated exactly the same as everybody else. They get the same amount of respect. And that goes with people who have physical disabilities and some sort of cognitive disabilities. Just because they're different, you need to work together, you know? And this is a good place to teach them that. And you know what? This is life. This is the world. You need to work together. One of the things I also tell kids is when they come to the library to volunteer for me, they're here for the kids. The kids are the most important. We talked about that earlier. You introduce yourself to the little one first. Socializing, not a priority during the program. Afterwards, when they're cleaning up, absolutely. Beforehand, sure. When they're doing their homework in the library, absolutely. At school, yes. During volunteer time, no. And sometimes that means you need to separate people. So if you have kids like this who are like, you know, glued together, one of the things I would tell kids, like when we had craft programs or big like party programs, is I want everyone to separate. I want you to like what's it called in basketball? Zoning. We need to have a kid in every zone. And so you separate them out and put them in charge of things and make sure that they're all participating and not just interacting with each other. And one of the reasons for that is it can be intimidating. If they're doing their thing, I had this one group of Lego boys who were so into it, and they were like 8th and 9th graders, and they were hysterical because they loved Legos and they were so good at it, and they'd be like setting up Lego programs and being like, oh, I know how to do this, and I know how to do this, and I have this person, and I'm like, you guys are crazy, but I love you. But if they're like that when the kids walk in, it's very intimidating. And so I'd have to say, all right, guys, kids are walking in, time to break it up. And sometimes that's hard, especially for those like kids who are intensely excited about this, whatever they're doing. You're like, this is so good. But what I need you to do is show the kids how to do that. Maybe help them sort through and find the, magic wand or the people. The people always fall to the bottom of the Lego bins. You ever notice that? And so you can put a kid in charge, especially like a quiet kid. Okay, your job is to sit over here by the bin or by the pile of Legos and find the people. Help the kids find the people. And be like, yes, I'm the people person. You can find jobs for everybody. What was it we talked? Food. Yeah, if you have allergies, or if you have policies about what kind of food can be served, schools have a lot of policies about that. You might want to have just a little reminder about sharing food. I had programs too where the kids, we'd make popcorn for something and the teens would eat it all. And I'm like, yeah, but just a little gentle reminder. You're not actually here to eat. Doesn't anyone feed you at home?
And if they're coming right from school, oh my God, they could eat the
Yes.
woodwork.
Bless you.
So hungry.
So it might be a good idea to
Have something
snacks.
for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely, especially when they're setting something up. Absolutely, that's a good idea.
I might add something about furniture because
Yeah.
a lot of times teens are ending up moving around the furniture or setting up tables or things like that.
So what specifically would you write?
Just sort of to be respectful and safe when doing those
Okay.
things.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right, and if something's too heavy for them, speak up.
Yeah.
Yep. And, you know, get help. That's one of the things too, like I talk to people and you are their biggest role model, right? So you want to ask for help when you need it. We're not always that good at it, but we need to ask for help. You need to admit when you make a mistake. You need to be flexible. If you're having a bad day, speak it out loud. I'm grumpy today, you know, whatever. Those kinds of things will help the kids because those are things that they will take with them and they can model. So if you have a kid, you know, comes in and says, I'm really grumpy today, be like, I'm so proud of you. I'm so glad to know that because that way I can help you and I can put you, you know, in the corner with the Lego people and I won't stress
So
you
don't
out.
have to-
I won't stress you out by putting you in charge, right? Absolutely. So the story team program I have is probably, you know, it's one of those things. I dreamt up in the shower one day, and I wanted to do pajama story time. I was a teen librarian at the time, and I missed story time, and I'm like, I want to do pajama story time. I want to wear fuzzy slippers, and it sounds so fun. And the children's librarian was like, sure, whatever. And so I had this group of like drama geeks, like theater kids. And I was like, oh, they'd be perfect. So I came up with this idea. And basically all it is you do your regular training. And my training is usually how you work with kids, here's the policies, here's how the library works, tour, kind of stuff like that. We would add a little bit to that, and that would be practice reading. And this program, I think, is particularly good for kids who need some confidence, who are struggling with literacy skills, and kids who are dramatic. And some of those kids who may not fit in everywhere blossom in this program. I've seen kids who at the beginning had a lot of trouble reading, you know, basic stories, and by the end they were just absolutely phenomenal. So all it is the way I do it is I have them sign up for different programs. I help them out, I give them a theme, and I would pick like an armful of books for them to choose. And we talk about what makes a good storytime book. Flip it open, look for pictures, not too much text, you know, all the things that you guys look for, you know, what makes a good storytime book. And that's another thing you can start thinking about, like, what makes a good storytime book? You want to make sure you read it all the way to the end, make sure the animal doesn't die at the end. I always tell them a story about, you said you read across America. We'd have community members go into the classrooms and read stories, and they'd always wait till the last minute, especially the people from town hall. And one day this guy came in and he was like, I need a book for Read Across America. Like, okay, let's help you. I have 2 minutes. And he just grabbed whatever book was, you know, closest to him on the return cart, and he ran out. And, you know, we were like, what did he grab? He grabbed a book where the kid dies at the end. And it's like, I don't even remember what book it was, but it was like, it was about not good things. And so I always tell the kids that, and you make it really dramatic. So you have to read the book all the way to the end to make sure you know where the story's going. If there are any weird pages, like Mo Willems has a couple of books where like you have to turn the book sideways or flip out the pages. You want to be prepared for that. If there are different voices, if it's in different languages, like Skippy John Jones, half of it's in Spanish, right? If you don't speak Spanish, it could be a little bit of a challenge. So maybe don't pick that book. If you have ones that have songs in it, if you're not comfortable singing, maybe not the best book for you. So, you know, talking about starting simply, the Elephant and Piggy books are always my favorite for the kids to do story time with because they're very simple, but they're very emotive. And so they can really act them out. So you want to do like a little show and tell, like this is how I would read this story. Like we are in a book. We make them say banana! And like you really just kind of stretch it out and be like, this was a simple, easy book. Look at the show I put on. You can do it too. And so what I would do is have them practice. I would usually what I used to do is I'd have them bring a book from home that they had read and do it on their own. I don't know, kids would never remember that, or they would just forget. So instead what I would do is bring a bunch of like beginner, the easy readers are usually the easiest ones because they're small and they're easy to tackle, a few words, and I have them practice. Try it out, and then you give constructive criticism, just like you would normally do. Really great job, but next time I really need you to keep your chin up so that I can hear you, because when you keep your chin down, your voice gets lost in here. Or really good job, but I need you to make sure everyone in the audience can see the pictures, you know, whatever. And then they really get some good feedback from you. So that takes a little bit more in-depth training, but it's so fun. And then the day of story time, what I would do is I'd have them, I was lucky I had a little window seat. And so I'd get the kids on the window seats because it was a kind of a natural barrier. They got to sit up a little bit and the kids would sit on the floor. And that way the kids weren't on them, because that happens and that's very, very hard. So I'd either put them in chairs just to give them a little help, or on the window seat so that they could have a little natural barrier with the kids. And then the kids would sit on the floor and then they would just take turns. And then we would do like a song every 2 books or whatever. And you can do it however you'd like. Eventually I had kids that were so good that they could just lead the whole thing, and I put them in charge and say, all right, you know, Juliana's in charge, and she's going to tell you when to sing a song, and she's going to do the introduction, and she's going to do the Itsy Bitsy Spider, and, you know, she's going to keep track of time, and they were really good at it. Some of my best teachers came out of that program. I have 2 kids right now in college who came through that program and who are going on to be teachers. So cute, so cute. But it's really, this program is, they own it completely. All I did, I would jump in like every time, once in a while the flu would come through, and I'd only have like 2 readers, so I would jump in, or my leaders would, you know, not be able to make it, so I would jump in as a substitute leader or something like that. But most of the time I would just sit back and watch and just make sure that, you know, the little ones were not escaping or whatever. So that was a really fun program. I also tried the Reading Buddies program, which the teens loved so much. And we did separate training for that, and talked a lot about literacy and reading and things like that. But like I said, the sign-up thing just drove us crazy. And it just ended up being too much work, because what would happen is parents would sign up and then they wouldn't show up, or they wouldn't sign up and they would show up. And so we never had the right number of teens to the right number of kids.
Yeah.
It just never worked out. And we were spending so much time trying to fudge with the schedule, that it just became silly. It was ridiculous. And so we had to cut that program, which the teens really hated. They're like, oh, we love it so much. So I don't know, if anyone can make it work, more power to you. The other thing that my story teens did, which was a huge success, was the stuffed animal sleepover. How many of you guys do stuffed animal sleepovers? It's like the best thing ever, isn't it? It's easy. So, because the stuffed animal sleepover, not the children, I always drew.
Explain that to a lot.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I was
Their
told.
parents.
Right? No, children are allowed to spend the night in the library. I always drew the line. Anybody who does sleepovers with real kids, I have so much patience. I don't understand
I
how
don't
you
want to.
do it. You guys are nuts. I would never do it, but stuffed animals, absolutely. That's yum.
How's that work?
So what you do is you have a little sign up. I would do a little registration card, and I would have the kids fill it out with their animal's name
Okay.
and their name and an emergency contact number. You need to make sure you can contact them in case, you know, their animal gets sick in the middle of the night, right? And then I would ask for details like, does your animal have any allergies? Is he potty trained? Sharon doesn't do diapers. Make sure he's potty trained. And like goofy things like that make them really happy. And then you give them a little piece of paper to remind them when to pick them up. The other thing to remember is that sometimes kids can't sleep without their animals. So if that's the case, you might want to bring in an auxiliary animal. Do you have a backup bear? You know, a friend to Bobo, because I don't want you to be able to like stay up all night. And then what I would do is if you had a bunch of them especially, I'd put their little tags around their necks. And I would have the teens stay an hour after closing, which was like the biggest carrot ever. I would feed them. It became a tradition. I would get a bag of M&Ms and we'd make popcorn, and I just feed them chocolate and popcorn until they were bouncing off the walls. I'm a terrible person. And so what we would do is I would hand them a digital camera. You can do it with an iPhone. We happen to have an old digital camera in the library. And I would say, go, have fun. And what they would do is they would take the animals, because they are children at heart, right? They are 5-year-olds. And so they would take the animals and they would pose them. And so they'd pose them in story time, they'd pose them having snacks, and then they would sneak to all the naughty places, like in the elevator, hanging off of the paintings, playing in the teepee, playing in the children's room, on the director's desk. I had, every once in a while you'll get a really cute kid, and I had this one kid with I think it was an aardvark, and I said, does, whatever his name was, I think his name was Cute Eyes, actually. Yeah, do Cute Eyes have any allergies? No, but sometimes he wants to escape. I said, oh really? Where does he escape? He really wants to go to Japan. Oh, okay. And, do you know an aardvark that wants to go to Japan? No? Okay, just checking. He really wants to go to Japan. Oh, okay. Yeah, so you have to make sure he doesn't go. Okay, I promise, I won't let him go to Japan. So what the teens did, they set him up in front of the computer, like pretending to look on Travelocity for trips to Japan. And then we had him in the travel section looking at books on Japan. And we took pictures of all of this craziness. And then what we would do is we'd print out report cards. And the teens came up with this. They wanted to have a little report card where they could write comments on the animal's behavior. And so it was like, shared snacks, like little checklists, like shared his snacks, took a nap, brushed his teeth, whatever. And then they have a little comment section. And it would be things like, the teens wrote all of it. It would be like, at first, Cute Eyes was really good with the group, but then all he wanted to do was look for a flight to Japan. So we had to bring him back to, whatever it was. And it was hysterical. And then we would just put a couple of the key, cute pictures and print it out if you have a color printer. The ink's expensive, but there's nothing like it, because then you just get a little report card. And in the morning, the night before, you set up all the animals in your story time, like rug or something, and with the little report cards next to each animal. And the kids will come in and be like, look, it's my animal! And they can see all the pictures of all the adventures they had. And it was bar none my best teen program ever. And
excuse me, but
No
this
worries.
sounds great. Did they read to the kids, the real kids, before they went home?
I would do, I did it a couple of different ways, but I would do, I combined it with the story team program. It worked a little bit better. So we'd have pajama story time, and then we would have a big send-off. And they'd even do, I love my story teams. They would do Old MacDonald, and they would do the animal that were in the audience.
Oh, okay.
So they would do a
So
big...
it's an aardvark.
You have to ask the kid, because inevitably there'd be a lizard or whatever. They would know. The kids know. And so then they'd do the big story time, and then we'd have hugs and kisses, and they would take pictures with their animals. It was the cutest thing. And then they would say goodbye, and they would leave. And then the next morning, if I could time it right, like during a vacation time, like during winter break or summer break, I would have another morning story time the next morning. But it didn't always work. Sometimes it was just a pickup.
With the teens again? Would they come
It
back?
depends on the schedule. If you can get the schedule to work so the teens aren't in school, then, or if it's on a Saturday or something, checking their email too. If they have an email address or their parents have an email address, you want to make them promise that they'll check their email once a day, especially if you're doing things, things are kind of not formed yet, or if there are weather issues or whatever, make sure they're doing that. And you can send out reminders via email. I used to send out reminders like, applications are ready for next week, or we have a volunteer fair, or whatever it is that you're doing, send them out reminders. I would encourage you to try to start thinking ahead and being really structured. The structure might seem a little much, but will help you, especially if you get inundated with kids. It's amazing when you open the doors to volunteers. Like all of a sudden, these kids come out of the woodwork, and you want to have, you know, a way to organize them. So, you know, you want to have an age cutoff. It's totally up to you. If you want to accept 5th and 6th graders, that's totally up to you. If you only want to accept high school kids, totally up to you. You could even have 2 separate programs. You could have a program for the you know, tween volunteers and teen volunteers. Absolutely up to you. But have that, you know, have it set up for yourself and try it and see what happens. And with kids, you want to be able to set the expectations, and you don't want to change it halfway through, because they're not going to like that. So set those expectations. This is a job. You're not paid, but this is still an unpaid job. I expect a lot from you. You are going to be helping me, and this is what I can do for you. In exchange, I'm going to give you these skills. I can write you a recommendation. I can introduce you to people. If you're interested in working with kids later, I can help you with that. You know, if you have ideas, we can put those to life. You want to do a monster party, let's do it. You know, you take their ideas really seriously. And then also you can use their ideas to help with your teen space. Their space, the collection, if they have ideas, if you have like weak spots in your collection, like I used to have trouble ordering graphic novels because I don't read them and I have no idea. And so I'd ask the kids, hey, you read graphic novels. Give me a list of your 5 most, like, your best graphic novels. Let me make sure I own them. Or what are your suggestions, you know? Or do you think this should go in the teen area or the grown-up area? What do you think? Like, ask them serious questions, and they'll give you serious answers back. And it's that respect thing. You respect them, they'll respect you. And don't put up with crap. So you want to have a no tolerance policy for lateness, whatever you decide your standards are. You want to have a no tolerance policy for bullying. You want to have a no tolerance policy for cell phones, for socializing, whatever it is, set your rules, stick to it. Because otherwise...
Wanted to add something that I've been thinking about. I had trouble once with a teen volunteer that she didn't know boundaries, and I had to try to explain it to her, that people are not comfortable with you just going and randomly picking up their child.
Yes.
And I mean, I had a problem with an adult in the Storytime group as well doing the same thing, but I eventually ended up having to let her go because she just did not get it.
Didn't get it.
No matter how many times I explained it to her point blank, you know, people feel uncomfortable, and we need people to feel comfortable when they
Right.
come to the library, and so...
Some kids just aren't cut out for it. That doesn't mean they're not cut out for volunteering, period. They might just not be cut out for this. And I had a kid who volunteered to be a shelf reader, which is extremely tedious. Everyone hates shelf reading, right? Everyone. And she wanted to be a shelf reader, and she could not focus to save her life. She really just couldn't. And I don't really know if she knew how to alphabetize. Like I trained her, I tried everything.
Yeah.
I said, you know what, you don't really seem to be getting the hang of this. Oh no, I'm fine. And so, you know, I talked to her, you know, a couple email conversations, and finally, you know, I sent her this email. I said, you know what, I really just don't think you're cut out for this. You know, there are other programs. If you're interested in working with kids, you could be really good at that. This just doesn't seem like your cup of tea. Mom wrote back to me and said, can you please tell her what to do so she can do better next time? And I said, no, this is no reflection on her. She did nothing wrong. She just doesn't have the skill set or the interest in this particular task. She didn't fail. She's a good kid. I would love to have her come back and try something else, just not this. It's hard. It's very hard. That's one thing we were talking about kids and touching kids. One of the ways I get around the uncomfortable conversation of like the inappropriateness of touching other kids is I go a little overboard and say kids are germy. They have boogers and you don't know what they've touched, and they're full of germs, and they have colds and nasty monkey viruses. So you know what? Just don't touch them. Just don't do it. You don't want their germs. And the teens will laugh, and then they won't do it. I had a very strict no touching policy in my library, which, you know, it's sad, and sometimes you can't. Sometimes it doesn't work that well, but with the teens, I had a strict policy. That was the culture of this particular library. A lot of the little libraries around here, that just wouldn't fly. So it's up to you how you want to set it up, but you do want to protect them. You know, like you said, you want to protect the teen and also the kids that are, and whoever it is that's being made uncomfortable. And also the other volunteers too. Sometimes you have to mediate that, like, I put her in charge, so she needs to make the decision, so I really need you to work with her, whatever you need to do to take her right. It's hard. It's really hard. And that's why I want to make sure you give yourselves credit for it. Like, this is a teen program. This is getting the teens in the library, putting them to work, all those good things you're doing. And make sure you give yourself, like, the time and the space to do it all. And let it evolve, Every year you're going to have different problems, different things that are going to come up, and you'll come up with great new ideas. But like I said, it's hard work in the beginning, but once you get it started, it's so